Hello friends. So for today's video, I'm going to be predicting some Goodreads Choice Award nominees. I'm sure many of you, pretty much all of you, are aware of what the Goodreads Choice Awards are. Every year, it's kind of a popularity contest where there's a bunch of books that are nominated and then we can vote on what we think is the best book of the year for various different genres. And last year, I was doing wrap-up style videos for as many of the fantasy nominations as possible that weren't sequels to books that I hadn't yet read. This year, I've really prioritized reading a lot of newer releases just to get the information out to you. It's very beneficial to authors. Through some of the books that I've picked up, I have some ideas of ones that we'll see if I'm wrong or right. We'll see what happens. But there are certain ones that I think currently 99% sure that the 12 books, I have 12 written down, I think will be nominated. And I can tell you which one I think is going to win. And most of these are for adult fantasy. There's some other ones mixed in. There's one graphic novel that's mixed in here. There's one middle grade book that's mixed in here. Regardless, let's jump into it. I'm going to start with one that comes out on the last day that they can be counted for. And that would be November 15th, and the book is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. That happens all the time where books will come out and the nominees will show up. There will be the list that you can vote on, and the book just came out, so basically nobody's read it yet, but it's there anyway, and you're like, how does this work exactly? How do you come up with these lists? But I think that The Lost Metal will be there. It's Brandon Sanderson. He's one of the most popular fantasy authors. Basically anything he writes shows up on the Goodreads nominees, so The Lost Metal. Next up is a book that just came out, and everybody's been talking about it. It was #1 bestseller, and that would be Babel, or Babel, depending on how you say it. I normally would predict that this one would win, if not for a different book that's come out this year with a really big fandom. But I don't know. This one might give it a run for its money. So it has not only sold really well, but most readers have fallen in love with this book. They've given it a ton of praise. The average rating before it came out was really high. It's come out, it's still really high. So I know that the winner isn't based off of average rating, but a lot of people really love this, and I think a lot of people are going to vote for it. The thing that gives it competition that I'm like, oh, that book might still beat it, would be House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. I haven't read this book. It doesn't matter. It's a Sarah J. Maas book, and her books tend to dominate. If she has a book coming out, she is probably going to win. Her books are consistently bestsellers on, if you look at the Amazon list, not just the new ones. It's basically anything by Sarah J. Maas. Usually it's the ACOTAR series is #1, but this series, I just feel like it's going to be there too. Just now I had to stop and check when this book came out because I'm like, did it win last year? It came out this year, right? I know a lot of my friends read it and did not like it, but in my head I was like, why do I feel like it won though? And it's because A Court of Silver Flames came out last year and it won. Not only did A Court of Silver Flames win for fantasy last year, it won by a lot. So Under the Whispering Door had the second most amount of votes. It had 56,324. A Court of Silver Flames had, if you want to pause the video, you can guess. You should do that. You should guess how many votes it had. Okay, I'm going to tell you. It had 111,498. It has a really high average rating, and that fandom loves them some Sarah J. Maas. So I'm sure it's going to be on there, and I'm sure it's going to win. The next one is Keke. This is a story that is somewhat in the same lane as the mythology retellings we've been getting. So I actually, not only do I think this one will be on there, but I think Electra will be on there as well. Last year, Ariadne was on there, and it's the same author as Electra. And recently, in the last few years, not just few years, ever since Circe and Song of Achilles came out, I would say that these have been very, very popular, and because the Goodreads Choice Award nominees tend to represent what is popular, I have a feeling that Keke and Electra will both be there. One of the young adult books would be The Ballad of Never After. This is by Stephanie Garber, and it is selling really well. There's so many different special editions for this one. There's a lot of special editions for Babel too, but This one, there's so many different editions of the first book, and then book boxes have followed through, and there will be a lot of different editions of the sequel as well. I did enjoy the first one quite a bit. I don't know that it will win the young adult category, but I do think it will be there. I feel weirdly in the dark about young adult fantasy this year. I just looked at my list. That is the only one that is considered young adult fantasy. So that's my only prediction for young adult. And I'm very curious now that I've said that, what are some young adult fantasy books that you think will be there? Maybe I thought about The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. I think that one might end up being there. I'm not as confident though, but like I said, I'm just not as confident in general with the young adult books. Switching back to adult fantasy, I think Hunger of the Gods, another sequel, will be there. The first book, Shadow of the Gods, was on the nominee list last year, and I'm sure it will be again. I don't think it's going to win. I don't think that this author, while he does have a lot of loyal fans and a lot of people that really, really love his writing, I don't think he's quite... It's not even that I don't think. I know that it's not the same level of fandom as Sarah J. Maas and Brandon Sanderson. So I don't think it'll win. But Shadow of the Gods, I quite liked. Hunger of the Gods, a lot of people seem to like it even more. I actually liked the first one more. But it was a very solid sequel, and I would think it'd be very deserving to be on the list. Daughter of the Moon Goddess is another one. I would say Daughter of the Moon Goddess is one that, it's a debut. It doesn't already have an established fandom, but it has done very well for itself. And so I think that this one will be there. It has this feeling to it that's very much it's actually called the Celestial Kingdom. I was going to say it's got this celestial fairy tale feel to it. I think that it's very, very accessible. It could have been sold as young adult, but it is actually considered adult fantasy. However, I think by it being so accessible, that means people who don't typically read fantasy have likely been picking this one up and really enjoying it. And I think that whenever you have a book that has a little bit more mass appeal, it tends to do well with the Goodreads nominees. Something like Hunger of the Gods I was talking about a second ago, that one feels a little bit more for the fantasy fan, whereas Daughter of the Moon Goddess is a fantasy book for people that don't necessarily always read fantasy. Not just those people. I mean, it's a fantasy book for fantasy readers also, but I think you know what I mean when I say that. Now for a middle grade prediction, I think that the sequel to Amari and the Night Brothers will be on there. It's called Amari and the Great Game. But Amari sold really well. It has become very popular. It's very well loved. A lot of people really, really enjoyed that first one, myself included. I thought it was really cute, but also hit on some pretty heavy themes. And I thought the way that those were done in the story, the way they were woven into the story was great. It's got the magic school setting. There's sort of a mystery element to it as well. Next up, we have The Stardust Thief. When I first picked this one up, it was right around when it came out. And initially, I was like, oh, I feel like this one, I can see this one becoming more popular. Because when I first picked it up, it didn't seem like it was getting quite the attention I was expecting. And then when I went back and looked at how many ratings it's gotten since then, it's gotten quite a lot. So I think this one will be on the list. It was a lot of fun. It's 1001 Nights retelling. The characters are all very unique and interesting, and there's some tropes in the story that I think a lot of us really enjoy. It's also fairly accessible if you don't typically read fantasy. It's not too epic in scope, and the setting is a little bit different than your usual European fantasy or medieval fantasy setting. And on top of that, the adventure feel of this, that almost nostalgic, just we're going on this quest sort of a story. We've turned away from that for a while in fantasy, and this one is like, you know what, I'm going to bring it back, and it's going to be a great old time, and you're not going to be sick of it. You're going to be glad it's here. And I think that's been the case for a lot of people. After that, we have the Atlas Paradox. It's the sequel to the Atlas 6, and this one is going to be coming out in October, so it's not yet out, but the Atlas 6 has gained a huge following. There are some very, very loyal fans and people who just have lost it over this book. I would say it's gained a lot of attention over on Book Talk. And the Goodreads nominees are always a specific demographic of readers, and typically, not always, but I would say typically that demographic is slightly younger. And I would say a lot of the people who are on Book Talk are slightly younger. I say this like I'm really old or something, but I think that that's probably likely kind of true. The same people who are on Book Talk are likely the readers of the books that end up on the nominees list. So I could see the Atlas Paradox being on there also. Last is our graphic novel, and that would be Demon in the Wood. So my husband, who has been a comic book fan for years, the comics and graphic novels section, he'll go to it and he's always like, what even are these? Not in a snobby way, just they're never the kinds of graphic novels and comics that he picks up. And I could be incorrect about this, but to me, that section of the nominees, it always seems like it's the kinds of graphic novels and comics that people who tend to read novels or book series, it's like the ones that we every now and then try and the ones that we sometimes pick up, as opposed to the kind that really hardcore comic book fans would pick up. It doesn't seem to be that kind of list. I am predicting this will be on there just because Leigh Bardugo, she is a big name, but on top of that, she's a big name with Goodreads. I believe Rule of Wolves actually won for young adult last year. So anytime she has something coming out, I just expect it to be on the Goodreads nominees. I would love to know what books you are 99% sure are going to show up. Do you predict a lot of the ones I mentioned are going to be there? Do you have some other ones that I didn't mention? But anyway, thanks so much for watching. It'll be really fun to see if we are correct with our predictions. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.